Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And this ought to of course be a pretty interesting week with the Nosig blackout in effect for the first weekend. We don't know how long it will last. And my very first impressions on the blackout so far, I have not taken part in it. I do think that at least in the first weekend we'll see like a pretty big rush of people trying to experience the new Nosig. Lots of hunting, lots of fight happening as well, and especially the people that enjoy PvP in smaller fleets, I would say, seem to be very happy with the change. They're often finding brawls between hunting fleets and things like that. The big mega blocks don't seem too bothered at this point. They are starting to recognize that they're actually still the ones that are the biggest, most organized groups, and that gives them a huge advantage, especially with something like the Nosig blackout that across all players. This affects all players equally, and so their edge in organization actually either makes them even stronger or it doesn't really matter that much to them. So overall, it is really the solo players, the people that are more solo minded and actually want a PvE in Nosig, that will be hit the hardest by this. Maybe also the smallest, less organized groups that want to eke out a living will have a hard time doing so. But of course, Nosig is endgame. Nosig is where all of these, the true sandbox where organization and your size matters a lot and gives you big advantages. And so that's a decision that everyone will have to make for themselves. Am I going to toughen it out? Am I going to actually try to make a living in Nosig being more independent, or do I have to join the larger coalitions in order to get that safety, that relative safety, and be able to do my PvE the way I want to, in my own quiet little way or something like that. So it's an interesting change. I do look forward to seeing how all of it evolves in the upcoming weeks. Of course, you should understand that right now for the first weekend there's going to be a massive rush of people roaming, of Tech 3 cloaky cruisers everywhere. So it is going to be super busy and very difficult to do any ratting, to do any mining, and all of that good stuff. So yeah, risk is back in 0-0, but the bigger groups can probably overcome that with their organizations. So I think it's actually not gonna impact that many players negatively. We'll see how it evolves, of course, and the impact on the economy, that could be very interesting as well. If it would cut down on Nosig income, on mineral generation and things like that, then us high-sec Care Bears might actually be in for even better times, economically speaking. Let's take a look at the new Eden store as well, see what's happening over there. We've got some sales this time for the Firewall Breach skins, apparently, a Minmatar skin line mostly. Yeah, looks pretty decent. We also have the Panther Chainbreaker Kuman skin. That's pretty unique looking, but I'm not sure that I like the yellow stripes here that much. And then yeah, sales on the Firewall Breach skins for the capitals as well. Oh, and the Chainbreaker. Yep, so we've got a Minmatar sale basically on a couple of their skins. And other than that, nothing too special to report. If you like to fly Minmatar and you want to pretty it up, then you might consider one of these skins at this point. Next up, we will move on to the market, of course. That's why everyone is here. And as always, we're gonna start with Plex and stuff. That's gonna be at 4 minutes, 10 seconds, let's say. Like that. We will start with Plex itself, that in GTA 4.4 is down to 4 million, just above that for the sellers, and buyers are down to less than 3.8 million. That's a substantial dip in the buyers actually. If we take a look outside of GTA, sellers have gone down to less than 4 million. It's only by a little bit, but it has happened, and then the buyers go up to 3.8 million, or just touching that. So the impact in the last week or so has been that we've gone down substantially in the 5-day moving average below 4 million ISK, but we are also pushing on the brakes here at the tail end. You can clearly see that there is still some hesitation, and I think it's mostly this part right here. The sellers in GTA itself are still trying to sell at more than 4 million ISK, and the buyers are starting to create a decent margin between sellers and buyers here, and it's basically these guys that need to become impatient enough to actually go below 4 million ISK. That's, I think, when we'll see the next leg down on the chart. But good to see, I think, that Plex has gone down below 4 million ISK. This is also still in line with my personal expectation. I think that the current changes in the game are having an impact here as well, especially I think from botters. You know, how many more characters are you going to try to Plex through botting when all of this is happening in Nosik? It's gonna be a lot harder to do, and as a result the amount may be dropping because of that, and I think lots of people are speculating on something like that happening as well. But then of course we also have summer activity. We have to still realize that that's part of the game as well. During the summer we usually have a bit of a slowdown. Maybe CCP has managed to create a little bit of a hype, but after that I'm still hopeful that we'll go even lower than what we're seeing right now. The multiple pilot training certificate looks like it was actually a decently extended sale, considering how long the increased volumes have lasted, and we went down to 1.5 billion ISK, cutting 25% of the price just like that from the peak at 2 million. And right now we are selling these for almost 1.7 billion, so it's going up quite quickly. Buyers are mostly coming in at 1.515 billion. One though is getting close to 1.6 billion already, so the good times are over at this point. If you want that investment in a multiple pilot training certificate, you're gonna want to buy it right now, because pretty soon volumes will drop off to nothing and prices will go back to where the market actually feels these should go. So if you want that trade, you need to get in now. If you have the patience, you could wait for another sale to happen. If you look at a year ago, basically CCP has pushed that multiple pilot training certificate through the summer and then autumn all the way up until December with several sales. We're not sure if that's gonna happen again, but perhaps again the summer decrease in activity might also have an impact on what CCP does with its sales, and this looks to be right in line with another round of multiple pilot training certificate sales. That could mean that this is not the right time to buy. Wait for a second one or a third one or maybe even a fourth one. We will see. All of this of course also created the first half of the year here created the massive opportunity in skill injectors, so we gotta remember that as well. But first we'll take a look at the skill extractors that are of course just like Plex going down in price as well, now heading below 450 million ISK on the chart. It's 446 for the sellers, 437 million for the buyers. And in Jita, let's take a quick look at that. Yeah, not much of a difference. Oh, actually, yeah, quite a bit of a difference as well. 467 million for the sellers, 446 for the sellers in the player-owned trade hub. So here again, we see the player-owned trade hubs being very competitive, dropping their price below 450 million, which I think is like a similar psychological barrier to the 4 million for Plex itself. But in Jita, no, people are still trying to sell them for close to 470 million ISK, starting to make a decent gap between sellers and buyers here again. So I think that here we will see that same pattern. Of course, you get a bit of hesitation at the tail end, a sharp drop off to 4.3, but here we're back up to 450. That is because, well, the Jita sellers are holding out on dropping the prices even more, and then that's the real competition. Of course, will they lose patience and start to drop their prices? We'll see a second leg down, or is that not going to happen? And then of course, who knows where these items will go. After that, the skill injectors. Let's start with the large skill injectors. These are dropping pretty sharply all of a sudden from 1 billion to almost 900 million ISK on the chart. It's 936 million for the first seller, most 960, 965, and then 936 million for the buyers. That's definitely a pretty sharp drop here all of a sudden, and I think we will be looking at the multiple pilot training certificates for at least one of the reasons for this, because this makes it a lot cheaper to have your skill point farms up and running. And this is exactly what I was talking about. During all of these sales from CCP, the large skill injectors went as low as 700 million ISK. The sales ended for a prolonged period of time, making these injectors became more expensive, and as a result, look at that, up to 1 billion ISK, and look at the pattern potentially repeating itself from right now. So this is definitely one that we're gonna keep in mind and keep taking a look at, because there could be a predictable experience if CCP decides to repeat the selling patterns for the multiple pilot training certificates. Very interesting in my opinion. Next up we've got the small scale injectors, very same pattern of course, held on to 200 million ISK for quite a little bit, and here we have the dive down at the tail end, in my opinion, because of the sale in the training certificates. Sellers are just below 200 million ISK, buyers though 178 million. Here again a decent margin starting to open up, and even the JITA sellers have decided to go below 200 million for their small scale injectors. We finally have the daily alpha injectors that are basically flat, just above average. It's probably its new normal price considering inflation over the course of a year, bringing the price from just below 60 million to just below 70 million ISK if you want to have these daily alpha injectors not from the store. 69 million almost for the sellers, 64.6 for the buyers. I think this could be considered the new normal. We always have to keep inflation in mind as well, of course, especially when we're looking at 1 year moves. Next up we have the minerals coming in at 11.15. We'll take a look at these. We have Nullsig, that especially the Imperium, that announced a bit of like a blockade to try and make HiSig feel some of the pain as well. Now I think that overall, when they'll be looking at what's happening with the Nullsig blackout, that they'll see that their organization, standing fleets and things like that will already be very good counters, and members that want a PvP I think will be very happy with this. So I'm not sure how long or if they really are going to try to make ships more expensive. Keep in mind as well, they'll have to go through a massive reserve of minerals that exist in the game at this point, mostly created by them as well, I would say. And I think that we're also starting to see that these kinds of opportunities get taken advantage of, not necessarily by Imperium members, but perhaps by other big traders or other players in Nullsig, because we do see that Tritanium went up to 7 ISK, but is already falling back down substantially. Sellers, if we take a look especially in JITA, are here down to 6.6, 3 jumps out, and in JITA itself 6.75 ISK for the sellers. Buyers are at 6.55, so that gap has closed, and that must mean supply coming in from 7 to 6.76. So lots of competition, 1 billion units here, 500 million here, 1.7 billion units here, bring the price down 1.7, 6.8, 6.7. So it goes very quickly. People are willing now to dump lots of Tritanium very quickly. Must also note 1 billion, 500 million, 1.7 billion. It's not that huge in numbers. This is not completely unabsorbable by a big entity with some patience, or just by a couple of big manufacturers that want to snag a couple billion Tritanium for their production lines. So who knows if this is just a small temporary reprieve, and we might be going back up as well. I think some of the other minerals might tell us more. Here is Pyrite slowly landing at 4.3 right here. Sellers 438, buyers 410. So we're staying above 4 ISK. Trade volumes are pretty low, I would say. So this one has been able to basically hold on and seems to stay substantially above 4 ISK. After that we've got Mexel. I think this one could be interesting, and here we have a drop off in the price from 65 to 60 ISK. Are we going even below that? Yep. First sellers coming below 60 ISK, and then we've got 57, 69 for the buyer. Super narrow margin here again. Volume wise in the 20 millions, not that much to say, but we are basically back to a slightly below average price for the whole year. You could say, if we count this part, 65 I would say would be the average normal price. So I'm seeing some renewed pressure on the price here already. Let's see what Isogen is doing. Yeah, went to a 1-year low point. He's bouncing just above 15 ISK now. 15.26 for the sellers, 14.82 for the buyers. So this one is definitely not being blockaded too hard. It is of course also the most overproduced mineral I think in the game for Tech 1 production. And then we also have Noxium that is flat at above 300 ISK, so holding on to that price range of 300 to 325 decently well. We're talking 318 for the sellers, 296 for the buyers, so doing very well. And then we have the of course, Zydrine and Megasite that I think is also massively being produced in HiSec. Really flat between 5 and 550. Here we get 528 for the sellers for Zydrine, 496 for the buyers. Bit of a gap opening up here between buyers and sellers. And this is that new pattern. 9 million, 1 million, 5 million, 5 million, another 5 million. These are HiSec moons that bring their production to the market. I have little doubt about that it is no longer nullsec that's able to dictate the price of Zydrine and Megasite. It's really HiSec that is competing very heavily and driving these prices down substantially. Megasite is still under pressure, 435 now for the sellers and 416 for the buyers. Bit less of a margin here. And again, that same pattern, 3 million, 2.6 million, another 1.5 million, sell orders of 600k, and then here another 3.6 million, more of them below 1 million. Lots and lots of individual sell orders of much smaller volumes. These are coming from the smaller HiSec entities that are massively producing these in HiSec. And then finally, we've got Morphite that is doing a double jump. That's very interesting, of course, especially if in mid-May you managed to buy this for close to 7,000 disc. We are now selling at almost 11,000 disc for Morphite and 10,100 for the buyer. So this is a nice sell opportunity in Morphite, especially, well, for those that have held on when we went from 7.5 to 9,000 disc on the chart. This is a great opportunity to take some really nice profits, and so tied to Tech 2 production, this is definitely a different story than the other minerals, and perhaps this is something that the nullsec entities that do want to hit HiSec might be deciding on, of course. Is it very feasible to curtail and to drive prices up in Tech 1 production and the base minerals of the game? I think that that's a huge endeavor, and that you'll eventually just succumb from pressure of other groups, and just the general amounts that are existing and produced in the game will make that really hard to actually achieve. But something like Morphite, something like ice products, those are definitely areas of the game where the nullsec entities could hit HiSec and their production cycles very hard. And so perhaps this is what's happening here, or it could just be that on lots of destruction in the first days after the after the nullsec blackout, that people are expecting there will be huge demand for stuff like this. So Morphite is of course a different mineral from the others. This one is jumping out. On most of the others I'm actually starting to see just the regular market forces taking over. Titanium peak seems to be over. I think this one will tell us a lot in the upcoming weeks, depending on where that one goes. Next up we have our PI materials coming in at 1745. Let's take a look at these. So we've got the broadcast nodes that went to a 1-year low point about 10 days ago. You can see the volume increase as well. People, of course, taking advantage of that opportunity. And we're back to that below average price, 1.9 million for the sellers, 1.8 million for the buyers. This is still okay to purchase at, but of course, your one buy opportunity where we actually have had an average price on a couple of days at around 1.7 million. That will have made for some really good purchases. I think if CCP does decide that the nullsec blackout is too severe and they actually bring out a structure to bring that back, this could be a major purchase. Next up, we've got the construction blocks slowly edging back on that average price of 11,000 disc from the bottom up. Most sellers 11,100, 11,200, and then buyers 10,400 to 10,000 disc. So decent margin between the two. The average price seems to be on the sellers. So if you do want to sell your construction blocks, definitely have the patience to compete in that area. Next up, consumer electronics staying below average. Try to get back to 13,000 disc. I guess we're between 13 and 12k, considering the daily average being all over the place here. 13,000 for the sellers, 12,000 for the buyers. That was exactly what we were expecting considering these data points. And so you could say that we are a touch below average, but not by too much. Next up here we get coolants flat at 11,000 disc. Not bad, historically speaking. I think this is also a normal price for coolants. We're talking 11,500 for most sellers, 10,800 for most buyers. Pretty regular, okay price for coolants, I would say. Nothing that stands out like this massive peak here in March. Enriched uranium is getting back to 14,000 discs, so a little bit of upwards pressure here in my opinion. 14,400 for the sellers, 13,400 for the buyers. As I've said in the last couple of weeks, what I'm mostly looking forward for here in PI are some real sustained pressures due to the lower activity. Causing lower demand, so we gotta be very specific and pretty lucky here that of course the people that keep playing keep producing everything and that there's just fewer buyers here. And apparently for enriched uranium it's the exact opposite at this point. There seems to be a little bit of a less supply than what is needed for the game, and we're slightly above average. Integrity response drones also had a little bit of a dip towards 2.3 million, manages to get back to an average of 2.5, yeah, just above that for the sellers, 2.3 million for the buyers. So a bit of a gap, but here not too easy to make great deals like with the broadcast nodes. The mechanical parts then, alright, first one, fuel related PI material, that's actually getting back to a less than average price for the year. Between 11 and 12,000 discs and actually close to 12k is where I would put the average. We're now selling for 11,300 disc, buyers at 10,700 disc. What you should note though is that with this pressure here in the price, we do have more supply, but the buyers are staying where they are at. They're happy with this price. For instance, it's basically the gap between sellers and buyers that is dropping substantially on more supply. These are pretty big production numbers here, setting the price to a lower range all of a sudden. So that's maybe the pattern that I was looking for a little bit, of course. It's not yet where I want it to be, where I would say, yeah, we need, we can start buying mechanical parts, but you can see that we still have that steady production. It's very easy to make, but if you're finding fewer buyers, you're gonna have this pattern where players start to bring in big volumes and they're just willing to undercut by quite a bit all of a sudden in order to get rid of their stocks. What we then need, of course, is these guys to actually see the opportunity as well, drop off in price, and then we can try to take advantage of what's happening. We have a whole summer for that to materialize, and maybe even historically speaking, from my experience, September can also be counted as a summer month for the EVE economy. Next up, we've got the nuclear reactors, also getting to a less than average price, but this one has been very, very bad in volumes. We're talking 94,000 for the sellers, 81,000 for the buyers. 81,000 for the buyers is pretty low, but I wouldn't risk big numbers on this one, to be honest. Organic mortar applicators flat on its average of 1.1 million, so just above that for the sellers, just below that for the buyers. This is okay, definitely not an opportunity like here in mid-May, where we could have bought this for like 950,000 disc. Robotics went to 110,000 disc, can't sustain that, it's actually under pressure in the last week or so. 102,000 now for the sellers, 92,000 for the buyers, so a bit of pressure here. But one thing that we have to remind with the robotics is this chart is basically between 90,000 and 110,000. This is actually very, very stable. This is a pretty narrow range for this PI material. Self-harmonizing power cores next, to working on a double spike, 2.1 million about a month ago, then went back to that average or slightly below average 2 million price range, is now selling for 2.2 million, buyers are still below 2 million. So this is basically a gap opening up due to a lack of supply or due to buying. I'm not seeing the volume increase really, so basically a lack of supply is actually causing the price here to go up to an above average range for the sellers. So very interesting that now for the first time in a long time, it's also been a decently long time since CCP has introduced a structure into the game, and now we're starting to see divergences due to, of course, supply demand differences as well. In the good broadcast nodes actually just goes to a 1-year low point about 10 days ago, and then now we have the self-harmonizing power cores that are shooting to an above average price. Not yet a 1-year high point, you'd need like 2.4 million for that, but potentially, you know, lose enough, and this could happen here. So it's nice to see some differences between the market activities within this category of advanced PI materials, which we would normally tie to structure. So if CCP holds off a little bit, you do see the market forces doing different things depending on, well, what happens in the sandbox. The superconductor, something that I'm producing, unfortunately staying below average, going below 12,000 disc for the sellers, 11,300 disc for the buyers. I'm definitely gonna hold on to my production at this point. Then we have the test cultures that are slowly climbing out of the gutter. Went well below 7,000 disc for a while and is now selling for 8,300 disc. Also, I think on basically a bit of a lack of supply and production here. 6,700 still for the buyers. They're still just not budging at all. This is basically a super small market compared to what it would normally be, and no one is producing this anymore. So that's the exact opposite of what I'm looking for. I'm looking for materials where production is continuing but demand is decreasing. Here everyone is like, this is so bad, who the hell wants to make test cultures at these prices? And so I actually see a bit of a normalization due to that, but on the wrong side for investors, of course. And then we have the wetware mainframes that are also working their way back to their average 2.25 million, but just below that for the sellers and 2.15 million for the buyers. Basically advanced material that's right on its average, you could say, for the year. Pretty cool to see that right now we don't have really very strict directions for any of these categories within PI, and I think part of it is because CCP hasn't really announced what they're planning to do with the game right now. They're more into providing us with interesting surprises, so let's see how that evolves as well. Next up, advanced wound materials coming in at 2550. Here we could see if something has changed due to Nosek, and well, crystalline carbonite working its way back to 160 ISK, back to an average for the year, is definitely a nice turnaround in the last couple of months. 164 for the sellers, 151 for the buyers. That is not bad. If you bought at the 1 year low point here at 130 and you had enough patience, you could definitely make a bit of a profit on the sale now. Question is, will this continue? I don't think it can go that much higher. I'm not really hearing such big rumblings in Nosek at the moment that is going to massively disrupt this. So I think that this would actually be the time to sell at this point. Next up, we've got the Fernite carbides that are stalling their increase. These are also crawling out of a May slump to a 1 year low point at around 121. Now selling for 150 ISK, buyers coming in at 146. Still a bit below average, but definitely a nice recovery in the last couple of months as well. You can see the hesitation at the tail end though. Sellers sometimes win out 154 on average, but then the next day there's some buyers that win out as well, and then we get 147 average. So here I'm starting to see the increase in price stalling. After that, we have the titanium carbide that had this massive spike up to almost 300 discs. That was not bad at all, and quite unexpected. Basically, this one was the first one to make a move, and that did tell us that something was happening in advanced wound materials. Right now it is recovering from that, and we are back at around 200 disc, I think. Yeah, 213 for the sellers, 207 for the buyers, so still above that, still selling well above average for the year right now. But the best time, of course, to sell would have been that massive spike here. It did a double one, so a bit less high, almost to 250, but this is pretty cool to see that this decline was not just straight back down to a less than average price. No, we actually bounced back up a little bit, and we're still above average here as well. So we're holding on to a better price. And then tungsten carbide, a late mover, but also shooting up all of a sudden. Normal average price 200 disc, you could have bought this for like 175 pretty easily, and is now selling for 263 ISK. Buyers coming in at 235. Now I am going to quickly take a look at my ticker, see if I'm holding any of that. Yeah, I'm holding tungsten carbide that I bought for 192 ISK. That's a nice profit to be made. So finally movement opportunity in the advanced wound materials. That is very nice to see, and one of the trades that I could potentially make. I think I'm gonna make that move myself, try to sell at a decent profit for that tungsten carbide that I bought. After that, we have the metamaterials. Let's start with the photonic metamaterials. A bit of a jump up in the last month or so as well, but staying below average, and you can see that same hesitation at the tail end here. So not much to say, 19,000 for the sellers, 18,000 for the buyers. You'd need to get back to 20k to really say that we've recovered though. Plasmonic metamaterials, these have recovered though. In March we saw the bottom 17,500 disc. We're now selling for 23,000 and 21,000 for the buyers. So that's a nice recovery that started quite a bit sooner than what we've seen here in the photonic metamaterials, so of course. After that we still have the non-linear metamaterials that have tried 1, 2, 3 spikes, you could say, although they're not that big in range. They are clearly 3 waves up towards an average price. Again, sellers are now at 29,000, buyers at 28,000. This is also pretty nice recovery after, well, here in this case it's actually a January bottom. And then we finally have the terahertz metamaterials that are moving up together with the tungsten carbide, I think, here, and actually jumping to a close to a 1-year high point, actually well above average all of a sudden. 27,000 for the sellers and 26,000 for the buyers. Okay, pretty good. These items are actually making some moves. We're seeing some opportunities, past and present, and it's good to see at least this section of the advanced move material market being alive once again. Now that, well, we have a bit of a null-stick shakeup, so let's hope that this continues. Fermionic condensates are also jumping up, or have jumped up about a week ago, and are now going back down. How close to 110,000 are we? We're actually breaking straight through that. 105,000 for the sellers, 99,000 for the buyers. So we're already making our way back to the average price here. Next up, we've got ferrogel recovering again to above 50,000 discs. So that's definitely quite a wavy move here. 51,600 for the sellers, 50,600 for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin, above 50k, above average, I would say. But these jumps from 45 to 52, you could almost trade on these, especially if you get buyers here and then sellers just above that. All right, some movements here as well. Fullerites spiked up 1250 for a bit, but are already back down towards that 1000 disc. Yep, for the sellers above that, and the buyers are below that. Hypersynaptic fibers, all right, another mover right here in the last week or so, jumping up from 12,500 disc, now selling for 15,300 disc. Am I holding any synaptic fibers? Quick look, I don't think so. No, I'm not, unfortunately. But another sharp increase in price to a well above average price here. Not yet a 1-year high point, but getting pretty close to that. So another nice opportunity in hypersynaptic fibers. Movements, live, good prices. That's nice in my opinion. Nanotransistors also recovering and currently trading above average on a lack of supply. So if you happen to have any of those available, that could be interesting as well. The phenolic composites, those are staying well below average, but slow waves keep going to higher points as well. Went up to 2,200 discs, so a bit too early to make any major moves on that one. Do I hold? I should, I think, phenolic composites. Yeah, I'm definitely holding phenolic composites that I bought for 1,900 disc. Right now selling for almost 2k, but I think you can see the potential in this good to go back up, especially considering what all the others are doing. So who knows? Ceramic fibers around average for the year. That's a more difficult one to decide on. 483. I'm actually seeing some pressure at the tail end here as well. Yeah, this one is going to be a bit more tricky. No margin between sellers and buyers, so this one is not going to jump off a cliff right now, but it's not the best place to sell either. So interesting week, I think, as well in the advanced move materials, with most of them showing signs of at least recovering towards average prices and a couple of breakouts as well. After that, we have the Tech 2 ships at 33.15. Here, of course, interceptors could be very interesting, considering the null-stick blackout interdiction is still very, very strong. Stealth bombers, you know, stealthy ships, I think will find their way into null-stick if you want to harass groups and have something that can potentially punch above its weight. Stealth bombers are definitely there. Let's see if anything moved on the null-stick blackout announcement. For the Aries, that's a big no. We're basically landing at a well below average price. 28.7 million for the sellers, 22.4 million for the buyers. If you try to make 22.4 show up on the chart, you are below everything. So very cheap Aries at the moment for the buyers. Next up here we've got the Basilisk. Also after the June spike due to the deployment of the Imperium, we have a pretty big recovery. We tried to get back above 230 million ISK, but supply is just too much. 222 for the sellers, 210 for the buyers. We're back at very cheap Basilisk prices as well. Cerberus is next, continuing to decline basically a little bit in top prices, and then its bottom price are going up as well. So basically finding each price here for the Cerberus, 240 million for the sellers, 221 for the buyers. That margin has narrowed considerably, the volatility as well, and volumes are slowly going down. So I guess that here you might hope for oversupply to drive that average price down to where you could actually purchase some, and then hope for some more volatility. After that we've got the Crow. The Crow is staying substantially above 30 million ISK, so 33 million for the sellers, 29 million for the buyers. Quick look if you got launchers on the fitting. Yeah, 4 launchers. This is going to make one of those interceptors that could still be interesting to hunt. It's got fast, can go through bubbles, and it's got missiles, so you can definitely keep applying DPS without needing to go into like too close a range for smart bombs and things like that. Just have a couple of tackle ships available, and then you're good to go. So this one I think will be like an in-meta interceptor, which is why it is staying substantially above 30 million ISK. The Guardian is diving down to a 1-year low point and basically landing at that 200 million range, 211 for the sellers, 190 for the buyers. You're again buying well below the entire chart. So the logistics cruisers are usually something that will make waves on big deployments, big wars, big fleet fights, not something like what I think is happening right now. Smaller gangs trying to, you know, find people that are careless with the Gnostic blackout. So that's why I think for the logistics cruisers we'll generally see a decrease in activity, but the interdictors of course could become massively important if you want to catch someone, hold them, have your fleet come in and then move on before a response. This could be why we are going up in price to 80 million all of a sudden in the Heretic. It's also on a lack of supply, so I could be completely wrong on reading that the interdictors are finding more use now in the blackout, because it's definitely a lack of supply here that is driving the price up. Let's take a look at the Hound, landing at a well below 30 million price point, 29 for the sellers, 26 for the buyers. Not much to say. Volumes are up though, so there is some buying happening there. The Ishtar we saw last week went to a 1-year low point that's substantially below 200 million ISK. Volume increase, you had an opportunity to sell at 250. We're already going down, of course, again. 228 million now for the sellers, 203 still for the buyers. So that gap is basically just narrowing, and the buyers are not budging. They're just above 200 million ISK, and the Ishtar could have become the in-meta ratting ship, I think, after changes to the Vexor Navy issue. But with the Gnostic blackout, I think that the idea of alright, we're all gonna just transition to Ishtars might have taken a bit of a hit, because well, we can clearly see that that price is going back down quite substantially. Or another possibility, of course, is that we do have a decent amount of investors that grabbed Ishtars and they're trying to take their profits at this point. That is just as likely, I think. Manticore Stealth Bomber, that's a lovely double spike up to 40 million ISK. Look at that, mid-May buy for 28 million, sell for 40. 2 opportunities to do so, back down to 28 million, and now we're already shooting back up, 37 million for the sellers, 29 million for the buyers. So that's the 3 sell opportunities that have formed now, where you could have bought these for 28 million, well below 30. You can still try to do so right now, but the sell prices have shot up to 37 and 40 million. This is quite the volatility that we like, I think. Manticore is always a bit more expensive than all the other stealth bombers, but there must be a reason for that, and this is actually the first one that is actually moving increased volumes. This has to be, in my opinion, some Gnostic blackouts buying. Bombers Bar might be having a field day right now, getting the kills now that local doesn't tell them where they're at, or tell their opponents their targets where they're at. So Manticore, yeah, this is very much alive, and this is why I personally really love the Tech2 ship market for trading. Stuff like this does happen, and that's pretty damn crazy how in about 3 months time you could buy these for at 1 year low points and then sell them 2 to 3 times at 1 year high points. That's kind of crazy. That's a lot of risk that you can make there. Next up, we've got the Munin, a little bit of pressure, not much to say, a bit too stable actually. 290 million for the sellers, 222 for the buyers. That's actually a pretty massive margin opening up. 29, is it really? 200 anyone trading outside Cheetah? Nope. 289 million. Look for that on the chart. It's actually going up here all of a sudden. So do we have a volume increase? Yeah, a little bit, but not by that much. I'm surprised that the sellers have gone up that much. That's a serious margin that has opened up here. If you could buy these for 222 and then sell them for 289, you've got a nice trade right here. So it's something that must have just happened because the chart has yet to catch up, but we get a massive margin opening up between sellers and buyers in the Munin. Unexpected, not sure what to make of that. The Nemesis went down to less than 25 million and is now back up. 31 for the sellers, 25.5 for the buyers. I still think that's one that I still have. Ticker Nemesis, yeah, bought for 24.5, could sell them now for 31 million. Bit of profit to be made there as well. Not as good as the Manticore. I mean, this is like a dream for people that want to trade in Tech2 ships. Here it's a bit more muted, but you can also clearly see that we have some opportunities here and there, especially when the bottom drops off to less than 25 million ISK. After that, we've got the Oneros, flat at a well below average price. As I always say, I don't really like the volumes in the Oneros. It maybe needs a bit of a buff to bring it in line with some of the other logistics cruisers when it comes to popularity. Not sure if that's ever possible, but this one is clearly being traded in such low volumes that it's going to be very hard to actually make great trades on it, I think. Then we've got the Purifier. This is also not bad, a bit more steady, but look at that in the last 8 to 9 months. 1, 2, 3, 4, lovely spike above 40 million ISK. Bottom prices come close to 25 million right here. So 1, 2, 3 very pronounced buy opportunities, and just look at this volatility right here. Buy for 28 million, sell for 44 million. Man, that's a pretty damn good trade to be made here. Right now we're recovering from that latest spike. We're landing at 30 million ISK, 31 for the sellers, 29.5 for the buyers. So we're still too early to say that this is going to be another buy opportunity, but yeah, this is another great Tech2 ship chart, of course, if you're looking to have these awesome buy and sell opportunities. I think that this time there might be more interesting stealth bomber, more sustained interesting stealth bomber for hunting fleets in nullsec, which might mean that our buy opportunities will become either at a higher price or a bit more tricky to find. The Saber next, yeah, this one is countering my theory that interdictors might make a bit of a comeback with the nullsec blackout, because this one is just flat right above 65 million ISK. Availability is still great, and then the price is not moving anywhere. I'm not really sure what to make of this. Do you guys think that basically interdictors for some reason are completely out of the meta, or why is this price completely not budging? Do these ships need a buff or something like that as well? I'm not sure what to make of it. It's completely counter to my previous experience, where usually interdictors are pretty big factors in fleet fights, whether they're big or small, and these usually move a bit more than what we've seen in the last couple of months, really bottoming out from 80 million to 65 million in the last year with no signs of any recovery. So I'm not sure why these interdictors are completely out of the meta, or if that's the reason why the price is so low. The Scimitar is actually managing a slow increase in price above 230 million ISK. That's actually pretty impressive, because you don't usually see a slow burn like that. 235 million for the sellers, 220 for the buyers. This one for people with patience, where you could have bought these for less than 200 million ISK. You got a bit of a profit to make here, but definitely doesn't have that same volatility as what we're seeing in the stealth bombers. And then finally we get the Stiletto, also with a lovely late spike in mid-June here up to 40 million ISK. He's now moving around that 30 million range, 31 for the sellers, 28 for the buyers. And this also, I think, seems to be a decently popular interceptor. although it doesn't have that many missile launchers. I'm guessing it might be like really fast or something like that. Definitely looks pretty cool as well. This is one, again, we're at an in-between phase, recovering from a mid-June spike, and so can't really say that you should be buying at this price range just yet, but it's awesome to see the volatility. After that, we have the Tech Tree ships, of course, coming in at 44.10. Like that, and let's see what's been happening here. I think that the cruisers might have increased in interest, especially for people that want to either solo or get into very small groups. I think that nullified and then covered ups cruisers might actually be really good if you want to catch some fixer navy eyes or something like that. So those might have made a move, but we'll start here with the destroyers. Here is the Confessor that went to a less than average price of 33.6 million on this dip, and then we can see the recovery, which I'm actually really happy about, back to around 38 million isk. 38.6 for the sellers, 32.5 for the buyers, and here much more, in my opinion, reasonable sell volumes: 13, 18, 14, 45 here, 30 here, but this is absorbable. This is quite normal. The last 24 hours we only see 3 to 4 sell orders, nothing too big. So basically market forces spotted that the prices went to a pretty low point and people are holding off on bringing too many confessors to the market. We get a recovery back to 38 million isk. Normal market activity, in my opinion. Very good news, because I was a little bit afraid of oversupply. Next up here we get the Hecate, that is still well above 40 million isk, is basically landing at its current price range. 43.7 million for the sellers, 39.3 for the buyers. Bit of margin here, 39 million, remember, almost 39 here for the sellers. And then what do we see? Of course, more than half a front page of new Hecates, but the volumes are reasonable: 12, 14, 26, 32 here. This is nothing too crazy. This is doable for the market, and it's normal that you're seeing more supply on the higher priced Tech Tree ship right now. Then we get the Jackdaw that landed at 40 million isk and is still managing to stay there as well. So we're talking 40 million for the sellers, 36 million for the buyers. Half a front page here of new orders, but a little bit smaller in volume, and this still seems very reasonable as well. So really an in-between one that is very logical from a market standpoint. What do you want to make and bring to the market right now? Well, Hecates are selling at the best price, so we're seeing most of that. Next up we get the Jackdaw at that average 40 million price range, and we get a reasonable activity, and then the Confessor dipped down, so we're definitely seeing a decrease in activity there. Good to see, in my opinion, because I am all for that healthy Tech Tree market myself. Finally, I have this Fable, the least popular Tech Tree ship, that's actually dropping down a little bit here at the tail end, coming down to 37, 38 million for the sellers. It's basically a little bit on a lack of buyers. I think that's pretty obvious looking at the buy orders here. Volume wise, this is not too crazy. Fresh volumes in the last 24 hours either. So this is, unfortunately for this vehicle, just its lack of popularity that is showing up for this chart. This drop down here on basically a complete lack of demand. Nobody's that interested in this vehicle. Let's take a look at the cruisers next. Here is the Legion. This is a surprise to me, not going up, staying close to 140 million on the chart. 146 for the sellers, 137 for the buyers. Availability: nothing in the last 24 hours. So apparently nobody is using Legions right now. This is very much a surprise to me. Or is there a trade happening outside of Jita? No, we're just not seeing it. This is kind of weird, because this is definitely a below average price, pretty cheap for the Legion hull. These are Tech Tree cruisers. I mean, like the best cruisers potentially, definitely the most versatile ones. I'm really surprised to see that this has not moved at all with the Gnostic blackout. Next up, let's take a look at the Loki chart, and that one is shooting up. Okay, so it might be a matter of popularity and what the ships can actually do, because we do see a pretty big volume increase in the last couple of days, and then the price going from around 160 million isk to 200 million for the sellers, 168 for the buyers. So the Loki has moved, I think, on the Gnostic Blackout, increased in popularity. It is considered to be the best Tech Tree cruiser. That is true. After that, we've got the Proteus that is flat at 140 million ISK, 143 for the sellers, 134 for the buyers. Volume wise, this is absolutely nothing. At least there is some demand, some buyers being put up, but this is really very abysmal as well. So the Proteus, nobody is flying that puppy apparently. And then we finally have the Tengu, which we did see from the ticker has made a move up. Not as good as the Loki, but is definitely up a little bit in volume as well here. 165 million for the sellers to 150 for the buyers. So basically these guys are not moving at all. It has been some buying in the Tengu from the sellers that has caused this increase in price. And all right, this is not what I expected. I thought we would see a more uniform move across the Tech Tree cruisers, but it's really only those that I guess are considered the most viable, the Tengu and the Loki, that have found higher prices and higher interest. The Legion, nothing, and then the Proteus, absolutely nothing. 134 million for the buyers. Very interesting. Not what I thought we would see, but also good news, of course, for people that produce Tech Tree stuff, because these are still looking like decently well working markets. And after that, we still have an extra product. I decided that it was time to take another look at the ice products. We're gonna go in at 50 minutes. Like that. And ice products, yeah, I have an investment in isotopes myself. It's been a while since we've checked that, and I think if you want to hit high sec, especially with all the structures there, then hitting fuels could actually be a feasible way to go about it. So we've got the ice products right here. Let's take a look. Here is heavy water, for instance. Went to a 1-year low point in the last couple of months, but is now recovering at the tail end. Went as low as 250 ISK, now selling for 318. Buyers are at 303, still well below average. But man, I wish I had checked this a little bit earlier. If we'd looked at that early June, we would have obviously spotted that 1-year low point, and we would have bought at 250, and we would have been in a pretty good position right now, as we're actually slowly going up in price. Next up, we get some helium isotopes. These have been very low since December, January, have recovered a little bit, but actually very slowly and very timidly so far. 833 though for the sellers, 745 for the buyers. That is definitely a recovery towards an average price for this 1-year chart. Hydrogen isotope, something very similar. We get 1-year low points in February, March here. Bit of a recovery, but not that great. 724 for the sellers, 690 for the buyers, is still below average. Liquid ozone next, not an isotope, so something a little bit different. This is a completely different chart. Starts the year at 100 ISK, ends the year at 200 ISK. Bit of pressure at the tail end, but we're talking 180 for the sellers, 161 for the buyers. So very slow movers these. Of course, you need a lot of patience if you're gonna trade in these. Nitrogen isotopes next, bit of a jittery movement, but we can see here that April bottom going as low as 562 is currently selling for 686, 650 for the buyers, but definitely no sign of interdiction or anything like that. We're still below average even at the 700 ISK range. Then again, oxygen isotopes that just went to a bottom price not that long ago. Damn, another missed opportunity. Could have bought these for 700 pretty easily. 767 for the sellers, 716 still for the buyers. So we're still well below average right now, but we can also clearly see a bit of a move up at the tail end here. And then finally we get strontium that I think was needed due to a change from CCP that finally crawled out of the gutter at the year end, and in January here, going from 1500 to 3000, and is currently, well, trading in this 3000 to 4000 trade range. 3400 for the sellers, 3000 for the buyers. So we're not seeing anything too major. What is interesting here is, of course, this heavy water chart. I think if you still want in on a potential profit here, this is the one to look into, because we're right after the bottom formation, And then the isotopes have definitely recovered from their lowest price points as well. But something to note, of course, is that these move pretty slowly. This is a 1 year slow wave that you can see right here with, well, a buy opportunity at 550 over several months here. And then now we've got this downturn in over the course of 1 to 3 months to a bottom. How long will it be until you can sell at the best price? It can be a very long time. The ICE products are very interesting, and I especially think that if Nosik wants to hurt HiSig, this is an avenue that they might take, because this is actually doable, logistically speaking, volume-wise, price-wise. This is actually something that's doable. Hitting fuel production is something that they could organize, unlike, I think, hitting base Tech 1 mineral production. I think that's going to be a lot harder to do. And so that is why this could be very interesting, and we could actually see stuff if that becomes their plan. But for now, what we're seeing here is a recovery from the bottom prices at around the early part of the year, and just slow movements in these markets. So this is not like the Tech 2 ship market, of course. This is investments for the very long term. Try to buy at the right time, and then try to spot the right sell opportunities here. For instance, this liquid ozone trade, if you bought below 100 disc about a year ago, almost a year ago, this could be the time where you can grab your 200% profits right now. But that's like 10 months later. You gotta keep that in mind. It is a completely different market to be trading in, but it can be a very interesting one as well, as I've said. And that's going to be it for this ETH Talk then, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Good luck out there in Nosik, and as always, I'll see you next time.